Hey, what's up everyone? I just wanted to give a quick demo of some updates on accessibility in the game that I'm working on called Myelin, and talk a little bit about what web accessibility is and how it applies to games and how to make it work in a game setting in a highly interactive web app kind of setting. So first off, accessibility in general is the practice of making tools or experiences usable by pretty much as many people as possible, particularly focusing on anyone with disabilities that might otherwise prevent them from using the software, whether it is a tool, a web page, a game, etc. So in terms of games, what that often means is providing an experience that is useful for people, that is usable by people who are visually impaired or hearing impaired. One way that that's been done in the past, one genre to look towards, is MUDs. MUDs are entirely text-based MMORPG type games. No graphics whatsoever, so someone can take any kind of screen reader software and just have that read off the entire game to them. Now, specific games may have had some features to remove certain bits of text that aren't as important to the game experience to make it easier on screen reader users. And that is an example of making a game more accessible. Now, with wanting to build a game that is not text only, there are some challenges. However, web technology in general has been built and enhanced in a way that with some effort, you can make pretty much any kind of experience on the web accessible. You just have to be a little strategic about it and kind of think about it while building your website or your game from the ground up, rather than going back and redoing it later to be accessible. So what does that look like here? Well, I'm going to go and kind of run through Myelin with a screen reader and with only using keyboard shortcuts and kind of show you what that might look like. I'm going to use the Voiceover screen reader, which is usable on Mac. It is built into the operating system. If you're on Windows or Linux, you may need to use NVDA as a screen reader, or you can use Chromebox, which is on Chromebooks. It is also a Chrome plugin, a Chrome extension that you can, I think, download and use on any operating system in Chrome. Okay, so let's get started. There's a shortcut to open VoiceOver, which is Command Function F5.
VoiceOver on Chrome, Myelin, Google Chrome. Back, Myelin. After the harvest. You are currently
And I can navigate around the page to look at text elements, of course.
Welcome to Myelin. Access Myelin.
I can also use Tab and Shift Tab to just navigate between interactable elements. So I can mute and unmute. I can also just access the game.
3. Dissecting vessels. Menu. Change password. Heading not found. You are currently on a button. Inside. Find new link to home. Link to Toulouse. Link to home.
So I can again Tab and Shift Tab around to these buttons. I have some labels here to give the user the context that they are linking to that character.
You are explore main exploration mode. Use arrow keys or JKLH to move north, south, east, and west. Use either shift and up, down, or less than.
Yeah, you might notice right now that the screen reader is actually reading off a caption that we can't see anywhere on the page, and it's kind of detailing us all the keyboard shortcuts that are built in. That might help people who are visually impaired and can't just glance at a part of the screen in order to see it. So for example, I can press tilde and focus on the feed messages.
Press tilde again to return back to previous mode 6 items. You are currently on a list. Connecting. Welcome to Myelin.
And then I can use the screen reader to navigate through the items and read them in order.
7 of 7. Explore main and ZJOS toolbar navigation.
I can also navigate directly to the toolbar and then use those commands.
Attributes. Goals. Save. Progress. Saved.
You might have noticed in the bottom part of the screen, I also have this little bit of text that announces updates, including error messages. And I have that being announced by the screen reader as well, so that's pretty nice.
Who? Save. Go. It commands. List you can read the item NPCS3 crawler list 3
I can also tab to items in the room and interact with those, which is pretty nice.
To click this button, press Control Option Space. Press interact with crawler dialog.
I can of course interact with NPCs. This is basically just a modal with buttons.
You explore attack menu attack moving turn. You have joined Team Cow Helpful. You are currently on a bot heading not found. 3 items. Me, N, U.
I need to add an ARIA label there so it doesn't say me and you, and just reads off menu.
Attack.
It's another reason why actually testing your accessibility features is pretty important.
You are 0, 7, table 0 columns.
And as you can see, I haven't really done all the needed work for accessibility on the combat view, so expect an update on that in the future. Another thing I wanted to show is landmark navigation. So let me get back to the exploration view here. On Voiceover, I can get to the navigation menu for Voiceover by pressing Control, Option U, and then I can navigate by headings. So having organized headings on your page is important. Any form controls, so I can navigate to every interactive element on the page. And of course landmarks. I can define different containers as landmarks and navigate around to those directly, which is pretty handy. So let me turn off VoiceOver and we'll take a look at how some of that is done. First off, defining landmarks. You always want to have a main landmark on a page. That is the important content of your page. In this case, the exploration view. You want to label your landmarks so that when you pull up that landmark menu, this is what the user sees. Otherwise, they would just see main. You especially want to do that if you have multiple landmarks of the same type on a page. For example, if you have multiple navigation landmarks, you want them to all have unique labels. Another thing you can do is you can tell the screen reader using ARIA attributes what the description of that content is. And that's actually how I got the screen reader to read off the keyboard instructions for exploration mode. I tell the screen reader, hey, this content is described by the text inside of the element with this ID. So you can see I gave this ID an accessible description text using view. The accessible description is here, so I can just easily kind of edit it in the component or even change it programmatically if I need to. I also hid that text from users using a mix-in. And you may see this if you ever look up how to visually hide something to make it text that is only used for screen reader labels. Essentially what I'm doing is clipping the element until it's 1 pixel, giving it a negative margin of 1 pixel so that it completely disappears. This is kind of a hack to avoid using display none while still disappearing the element. If you use display none, it won't be visible to screen readers either, so assistive technology can't actually use the text if you do that. So this is kind of a workaround. You may see this exact code or variations on it if you look up how to do this online. I don't know that there are pros or cons to the different approaches, but this is the one I found useful. Another thing I'm doing is having the text announced that shows up here on the bottom of the screen during the game, along with other text in different places. And I am doing that programmatically using a view announcer component. I initially started hand rolling my own before I found out that there was already one that was made that covered all of my use cases and then some. So anytime that we pass text to the Scudder text component, we also pass the message to view announcer, which you can find in the view accessibility GitHub organization. It is a view component and plugin that took me maybe 5 to 10 minutes to install and actually start using. If you've used Vue before it is pretty straightforward. And if you're using a different framework or vanilla JavaScript, you can, I'm sure, find plugins, components, or other code to do this exact same thing. It's really just using an ARIA Live region under the hood. So yeah, what else did I do that was kind of key there? Another piece of advice that I would have is just to, whenever possible, use semantic HTML attributes like buttons, like tables for tabular data. Avoid using divs for everything. Use headings where it's important to use them for navigation, and that'll help screen reader users. It's also just generally good practice on the web anyway. So yeah, that's it for my demo of accessibility today. If you want to learn more about accessibility, I always recommend this talk by Maria Lamardo. It's titled Content Loading That Isn't Broken, but it's actually a 25-minute talk on building an accessible web game, the matching game, which is usually, very visual. And over the course of just over 20 minutes, she makes it accessible to screen reader users. That's really what kind of inspired me to start applying these techniques to my game client. And it is an excellent talk. I also recommend learning how to use whatever screen reader you have. Voiceover is highly customizable, for example, and actually has built-in training. And also check out DQ Systems. If you're a web developer, you may have heard of them already, but they have a free accessibility audit tool. They also have training, although most of it is paid training. They do have a blog as well that is completely free. And they're putting on a yearly free conference called, I believe, AxeConf, and putting all of the content from that conference online. Here it is, AxeCon. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. If you have more questions for me about accessibility, feel free to drop it in the comments or follow me on Twitter at MuscarianGames and hit me up there with any questions or comments you might have. Thanks for tuning in.